climate change. It's getting hot in here.
Well, guys, I don't want to generate the carbon and use the aircon. I don't know about you guys, but
Well,
climate fucking pirates.
it's a little bit stuffy in here.
It is a bit stuffy. Should we run some aircon?
I think we should run some air.
Should we put it on?
Fuck the emissions.
You happy with a bit of aircon? Get a bit of airflow, get some carbon going?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, build.
Oh, no.
I'll just get my jumper here.
Oh! I'm trying to flick it while you're over there.
Well, because you got your shirt off, we were getting a little hot in here, and
Yeah, it's getting steamy.
the world was heating up.
It's going to cause water vapour, which is going to cause clouds, and it's going to cause havoc with our modelling for what the climate's going to do in here. No one even really knows. Let's make some fucking fake models.
So we are talking about climate change today.
Yeah.
Big one.
I've got no idea where we're going to go with this or how we're going to tackle it, so I guess we'll just fucking jump in and
Let's do it.
see what happens.
Yeah. We're not really.
Are we on?
Yeah, been on about a minute and a half.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Nah,
With you and your
can
shirt
always
off
edit it,
and-
always edit it, mate. Or not.
But do we want to? Maybe not. But yeah, talking about climate change today.
Yeah.
It's a very vast and controversial and very poignant topic at the moment. Everyone's sort of talking about climate change, and there's a few different opinions running around out there. But I guess we can all probably agree that the fundamental truth of it is there is a bit of a climate emergency.
No. Whoa.
Yeah. Come on now.
Mate.
Here we go.
Avoid these words like climate emergency.
Are you a
please.
denier?
No, I'm not a denier. But having had a look at this, there is a lot of hysteria pumped down people's throats to fear, to create fear amongst people. This is the new COVID, mate. This is the new COVID.
But we can probably agree that what we are doing as humans is affecting the planet, and it's for the worst. Whether you think it's changing
Are
the
you
heat.
talking, though, about temperature increase, or are you talking about what we're doing on a global scale to the planet, including like pollution, plastics, all that other stuff? Because
Yeah. So I'm talking degradation of wetlands, ecosystems breaking down, forestry. What are they?
Plastics pollution.
Plastics pollution,
forever chemicals.
forever chemicals, glyphosate,
Yes,
all that
glyphosate.
stuff.
Now, on that point, I'll agree with you.
There we go.
Yeah.
Good
If we're
start.
talking
Yeah.
about global warming temperature stuff, yes, humans are having an impact because there's multitudes of us now, and but even still, human behaviour on a residential or everyday man level isn't a major contributor.
We
to
can do things
global
to
warming.
help.
Yeah,
It's
the
not-
impact of man's behaviours on warming the planet is minuscule. That's the fact. Listen, and doing some research here, a lot of scientists will say that our impact on temperature is so minuscule compared to how nature creates climate change. So you've got oceans are a big player in the way climate is dictated or changes.
Yep, so ocean currents, so
Ocean
like fluctuations
currents.
in temperature, cold water coming up to the surface, warm water, all that sort of stuff.
El Niños and
La Nina.
all those sort of phenomena, whatever they are contributors. Man's impact is minuscule compared to these things. And you also the talk about the elliptical process of the Earth. You know, at some stage in the rotation of the Earth around the sun, there is we are closer to the sun than we're not, obviously, and over that period, that changes in itself as well. That balance changes like over millennia, over 100 years a period. So,
But if we continue to deforest, we continue to have toxic pollutions, we continue to put glyphosate on the soil, fill the ocean with plastic, drain the wetlands, we're not in a good way. And I agree, it's not just a one-issue thing. It's not just carbon. It's not just emissions.
that's a good
It's-
point.
I think that
mate.
is the issue, mate, is that we've made
Well,
it
yeah, you're
carbon.
right. Yeah,
Yes.
All you hear about is
carbon-centric. Yeah.
what we've got to do is we've got to get our carbon emissions down to a net zero or whatever, and the world's going to be saved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I've done a lot of research coming into this podcast, and first of all, I actually thought climate science was a lot more simple than what it is. It is so complicated. Like
Yeah.
there are so many things, like Rue spoke about. Like I've heard some very credible scientists talking about ocean currents operating over a 1,000-year cycle. 1,000-year cycle for ocean currents to play out in their entirety and then start a new cycle.
Yeah, right.
And then you
Wow.
bring into it the sun's activity, so like solar flares. So how much energy the sun puts out. And then you look at, again, what Ruth spoke about, the orbit of the Earth and the solar system and our proximity to the sun in terms of how much solar energy we get. And then you talk about undersea and above ground volcanoes and their influence on local ocean temperature, as well as like pollutants they put in the air, which will, reflect solar energy.
That's massive.
And you look at all of that in context, and then you add into that the formation of cloud and how temperature affects cloud, both in the tropics and then in the more middle latitudes. And you look at all those things, which we essentially can't change. We can't change what the sun does. We can't change volcanoes occurring. We don't understand ocean currents, and we don't fully understand or even partially understand really cloud formation and action in the context of like climate change and temperature rise. And then we go, but we'll just fix it. It's all about carbon. That's the bit that gets me. Like, I looked into this whole area of climate doomsdayers versus climate denialists and all this sort of stuff. And there's this number floating around, like 97% of scientists agree in climate change. And that seems to be true, right? But there's a lot of differing in the agreement of like
how it happens.
Well, how it happens, and like what does that actually mean? Because like I think every single scientist, more or less, there will be obviously some outliers, would say carbon's a greenhouse gas, and more carbon in the atmosphere will cause some temperature increase. I haven't heard any credible scientist, even the deniers or the people on the other side of the fence, whatever you call them, say that carbon will have no impact. But I've heard them say that the impact might be negligible, and that all these models that we look at of this sort of like climate emergency, and every time you see a picture of the temperature for the Earth, it's all fires everywhere and orange, and the world's going to go bananas because of carbon. I think there's a lot of disagreement on the modelling and the science and like how much of an impact we're having. I think we're having a massive impact, but I think you touched on it. It's like everything we're doing. It's not, we've simplified it to this one thing like, hey, we can solve the whole world problem, less carbon.
That's because we can put a number on it.
We can put a number on it, and it's
the
politically
emissions,
attractive, right? Because we can go, yeah, baby, we're going to go fucking carbon neutral, or, reduce by this many percent. We're going to build carbon scrubbers.
Yeah, and these big tech guys can come up with the solution and say, okay, well, here's a solution. We've got to get down to net zero, and we're going to do that with wind and solar, and that'll be great. We'll get rid of emissions, and then we're done. Climate change is effectively over. Well, that's a real
And the beauty of putting a number on something is that you can start charging for it.
That's right.
Because what's happened now is you've got
Exactly.
politicians who have grabbed a hold of this, and now you've got CO2 taxes or emission taxes and stuff like that. You've got, all these renewable energy type things, wind and solar, and people buying electric cars, and there's money behind this. So why isn't there a big world push against let's eliminate glyphosate?
Yep.
Yeah.
Imagine
plastic or
plastic,
fucking anything that's
or transport.
because
So you look at cruise ships. Holy moly! Do they pump out some smoke and use? I thought I read 1 million litres an hour of diesel fuel. 1 million litres.
Like cumulative for all the ships around the world? Kind
I
of thing
thought
or
it was
something?
one, but that's a lot, right?
That sounds like a lot.
Maybe that's for one trip.
Oh yeah,
But I'd have
could
to
be.
find. That's a lot.
Well, I guess when you think about a jet like an A380, I think they carry like 400,000 litres of fuel or something like that. So I guess say 1 million for a ship that might cruise for the entirety of a cruise. It goes from the one side of the Atlantic to the other. Maybe it does.
Maybe
use
it's
1
for a
million
whole
litres,
cruise.
I
That
don't
would
know.
make more
Yeah,
sense,
yeah.
right? But even if you look at an A380, 400,000 litres, how many of them are flying around?
Oh.
If we were serious about it, you'd go, okay, well, we'll put an end to that. But people, I need to go to Hawaii. I got to go on a holiday.
I mean,
But do we need to put an end to it? Like, I heard this really interesting.
We're paying for carbon, so
Well, yeah.
if I pay $2 per ticket that I put in, I feel better
I've
about
planted
it,
a couple of trees
and I'm offsetting some of my carbon. What a load of horseshit that is.
I mean, I'll sound like an anti-environmentalist for saying this. Like, I love the environment, and I'll try and do everything I can to look after it. And I hate the fact that we've got high levels of air pollution and ocean pollution, and plastic and herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, just poison everywhere you look. But in terms of just purely when you look at carbon and transport, I was looking at this interesting analogy from the early 1900s and talking about the level of horse manure in New York City. Because back then your primary mode of transport was horses, right? And they said, wow, we're in big trouble here. Like New York is going to be underground, like under a giant layer, feet high of horse shit. Because every day they were removing like 2.5 tons of horse shit. Now, fast forward 100 years, obviously nothing happened out of that because technology kept going.
There was a solution.
There was a solution. There was a technological solution. People are pretty clever. No one wants to live in a giant pile of horse shit. So my question is, do we need to start banning all these technologies and say, you can't ever travel again? You're never going to go on a plane and see any part of the world, or not even the broader part of your state because it's too polluting? Or do we start putting money into initiatives to make cleaner energy that's more affordable for people?
I think that's the crux of it, mate. And the two things that I picked up out of looking at this was, one, through our attempts to prevent global warming, we are destroying the environment. That's one thing I picked up. We are.
Yeah, I no doubt about it.
And we'll look at renewables later. And those renewables, particularly solar and wind, are causing massive environmental disruption. Also, one thing I picked on was it could all be solved really by evening out wealth around the world and eliminating poverty. So if a society is not in poverty or is wealthier, then they have more of a perception or a concern for their immediate future and their immediate environment. So, I mean, you look at some third world countries and you go to those countries as a tourist and there's shit everywhere. It seems that there's no regard for the environment. You've got plastic bottles everywhere, drinking bottles, a lot of pollution, that sort of stuff, a lot of traffic and transport. If that was all balanced out and these people had some sort of wealth was balanced out around the world, then we could actually, everyone would be more concerned about their immediate future. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
In that way, and then also in conjunction with providing more economical energy, because what seems to be happening now is,
hang on, are you saying people in poorer countries are more concerned about their immediate future rather than looking into the future?
No, they're not. They're not at the moment, because if
they're not. What
human behaviour sort of dictates that when you're in poverty, your main concern is just to get
right now.
Yeah,
immediately.
Dinner on the table tonight.
So I think you guys are agreeing. You just,
Oh, I was just trying to clarify because, they're not thinking about the future.
No.
They're thinking about,
they're thinking about surviving day by day.
It's like if you've got zero money and zero resources and it's a really cold night and it's snowing, you'll probably burn a tyre to stay warm. If that's all you've got, all you've got is a lighter and a tyre, you'll probably burn that fucking tyre to stay warm for the night.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you've got a bit of money, you'd be like, don't be stupid, I'm not going to burn that. It's going to create fumes and
And
that's
it seems
like really dumbing it down. But
I
guess that's the analogy.
Yeah, sorry.
It seems that this push for electric vehicles also is really aimed at the wealthy. I mean, I can't see myself, and I'm a middle class sort of person, I can't see myself buying an electric vehicle worth 60, 70 grand in the next 10 years. Not going to happen. I wouldn't spend that much money on a vehicle. And also the electric vehicle concept, why isn't that being really, really focused in these third world countries? So countries like India, China, where their population is massive, wouldn't it be better to maybe encourage electric motorcycles, like electric batteries for motorcycles, which is the predominant, like throughout Indonesia, a lot of people ride motorcycles instead of cars because of congestion and so on, So, but we seem to have this Western concept that if I buy me Tesla my electric vehicle, then I'm doing right for the planet. But it just seems all arse about to me. It just seems that there are buffoons in power making rules and regulations based on money and profit, really on the long-term benefits of the world.
Most of the CO2 solutions are politically charged and there's a techno solution for it. So we're talking about numbers before.
Yeah.
If you put a number on it, then I can come up with a techno solution to fix that. And these kind of, this war on carbon, we got to have carbon down, really plays into the hands of these big Davos billionaires who can come up, Silicon Valley billionaires that can come up with a solution and go, I can get that number down for you. We're looking at a number. Why are we doing that? It's controlling humanity. It's bringing down human rights. The number thing is a real issue.
And while we're
It's
talking
solely
about
focused on one thing
Yeah.
rather than fixing all these others. And
While
I'm sorry. I know there's people looking into those other things, fixing wetlands and, cleaning up the ocean. If you look at that, the great garbage patch in the middle of the
Yeah.
Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
There's like 5 of them now. There's like 5
Yeah,
great
they're all-
garbage on
yeah.
the different oceans of the world or something.
Yeah, so
crazy.
there are people looking into those things, but it seems like the big politically motivated stuff is all based on carbon and getting those emissions down.
Yeah.
It's just focused on that one,
One
thing,
thing.
really, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
all you hear.
And-
Carbon.
And while we're on that topic, carbon is not a pollutant. Carbon is a life-based element.
When it's natural.
Yeah, and CO2 isn't really even a pollutant either. It's just a byproduct of the use of carbon.
Well, if you look at the
combined with two water atoms.
The natural cycle of methane, say, from cows, that goes up, gets processed, so to speak, in the atmosphere, comes back down as rain. There's a bit of a cycle to it. The emissions are different.
But you look at
They go out and hang in there. And
but hang on, CO2 is also a part of a cycle too. So you've got a cow grazing in the paddock. It's consuming CO2 based plant feed.
material, yeah.
Yep. It has a shit or it breathes out CO2. That CO2 goes into the atmosphere and then is reabsorbed again via the soil. I mean, that's part of our whole
Or via trees
lack
or-
of nutrients and vegetation. And so that is a cycle. What the problem is with CO2 is that an automobile doesn't provide a cycle. So,
That's right.
So we produce we mine for the parts to make a vehicle or a battery. Then we use coal to burn fuel. The car emits out CO2, and that just goes into the atmosphere. There is no cycle. But
That's right.
But plants
Yeah.
do retake some in as a part of photosynthesis and that sort of stuff. So I read somewhere that in Earth's history, the CO2 levels have often been 10 times as higher than today.
They're
in
naturally based CO2s from weather events, from
But irrespective of that, we're actually living in a very, very low CO2 environment at the moment compared to history.
Yeah, like if we had no CO2, we would die because
Yeah.
every plant on the face of the earth would cease to be here, would have no food, would have no trees, and we'll die.
Well, did you see that Dutch farmer? And I think he's a doctor. He was in a panel, and he was speaking to a panel of, the experts who dwell on the numbers, and he asked them what they thought, how much percentage of the atmosphere was made up of carbon dioxide.
oh yeah,
And they had, have you seen it? And they had no idea. One guy said 5, one guy said 6, one guy said, well,
This was percent, wasn't it? 5%,
5%, 6%. One lady said 8%. But let me remind you that transport contributes to 49% of CO2 emissions. Well, no. How much CO2 is in the atmosphere? And they all rattled off 5 to 8%. And he said, well, it's actually 0.04%, not 0.5%, not 1%,
Not even 0.1%.
not even 0.1%.
So that's 400 parts per million.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. And he said that and this is a guy who works on farms and is involved, in the whole cycle of life. He said that if it drops to 0.02%, plant life on Earth will no longer exist.
they need the carbon.
They need
the
carbon.
CO2,
They need
yeah.
carbon to live.
Yeah. But isn't that's a different thing, the natural carbon. So even when the cows are eating and their methane burps contain microorganisms.
There's something funny about that.
I know.
Burps.
But they contain microorganisms that are taken up by the environment around them. So they talk about methane going up into the atmosphere and cows being the problem. Cow burps are the problem, but it's sequestered by the soil and the plants. And when the cow bites through the grass, that grass then sends off little carbons into the soil.
The same as when it shits.
Say when it shits and it urinates, we're getting a bit
Well, that's
So
the whole
potty mouth.
The
But
whole
what I'm saying
concept
is,
behind
yeah.
regenerative farming.
That's right. Yeah. And that's a whole, let's do a topic on that because
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
fascinating as well. But
Most definitely. It's the way forward.
yeah, definitely. It
It's-
sequesters carbon. If you're going to talk about carbon and it sequesters it, you talk about net zero. Well, if we're going to be net zero, then that's another topic, right? But if we're going to be net zero, then maybe we've gone past that. We need to get more out, sequester the carbon into the soil. But what I'm suggesting is, I'm not an expert or anything, but the CO2 that's coming from transport emissions is different to CO2 that's coming from plants and animals naturally, you know what I mean, in the cycle of things.
I know what you're saying. Like it's a nuanced argument. Like CO2 is CO2. Like if you look at it from a chemical point of view, carbon and O2, CO2. But what you're saying is there's a whole lot of other stuff that comes out with it.
Yeah.
Like when you
heavy
drive,
metals and
when I drive my petrol powered car home, it's not just emitting pure CO2.
No.
I've also got a diesel car. Obviously got diesel particulate coming out. You've got heavy metals. You've got things that are toxic. So it's not the whole argument is just if the only thing our cars emit was CO2, we'd be a hell of a lot better off.
Yes.
And like one of the things that I think we should be like passionately looking into is how to make, because clearly we're not going to stop burning fossil fuel overnight. We're just not going to do it. Like if the Earth just decides tomorrow, hey, no one's burning any more fossil fuel,
we can't.
We're cooked, right? It's impossible. Yeah. It's not a possible thing to do. So one of the things we should be doing is looking into how to burn it as cleanly as is humanly possible.
Yeah, and fossil fuel is actually created by carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is absorbed by plant and marine life. So plankton, algae and certain plants help, and through the processes, help produce natural gas.
Yep.
And that production of fossil fuel is continuous. So
it just takes a very long time, doesn't it? It's like a millions of year cycle of all that stuff goes into the ground and it becomes fossilized and it changes its chemical structure and all that sort of stuff and eventually becomes oil or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I read...
and then we can extract it and burn it as a fossil fuel.
Yeah, and what you're saying about burning fossil fuel cleaner is a good point, but I don't really know how to. I'm not a scientist, but I saw an interesting thing, right, about fossil fuels, and it was a bit of a lie about it. And apparently in 1892 at the Geneva Convention, the big man in the oil industry at the time, J.D. Rockefeller, he paid scientists to call oil a fossil fuel. So that's where that term come from. Mm-hmm. And he did that to induce the idea of scarcity in order to create a world market or price for oil. So if something is deemed scarce, then you can manipulate its price.
So you're saying like the psychology is like, shit, fossils take a long time to form. I better buy those bad boys up because they're all going to run out.
Well, that's
or
what they're
sell
saying.
them for more.
Or sell them for more, yeah.
We're going to run out of them.
Yeah, and that's what they're saying. The whole mantra now is that if we don't move away from fossil fuels, we won't have any energy. But that's a lie because the actual fact is that oil is the second most prevalent liquid on Earth next to water.
Yeah.
And at all times it's regenerating within the Earth, within the carbon cycle, faster than it can be depleted.
It's interesting.
So, they've created a problem in order to give us a solution.
Yeah, well, half the problem is creating the solar and wind is it's energy inefficient to create them.
Yes.
Yeah, you're sort of paying with all the pollutants up front.
Yeah, so someone said oil and fossil fuels are like, especially for people that have listened to our show before and we've talked about nutrition, is like steak wrapped in bacon, and solar and wind is like lettuce. Getting the energy from the food.
Yeah, right.
Nutrient dense, high energy, good fats in steak and bacon.
That's a good comparison.
And then you've got to eat a ton of lettuce to get anything close to that, and just the energy. What's the word?
Energy density or whatever.
Yeah, and the benefits of the net benefits of oil and just the power that it and the energy that it produces. You can get a small amount, large amount of power. Solar, you got to have large amount of solar for.
It's the same with like battery storage. Like batteries sort of work on a car scale, and I know they can be made to work on a truck scale, and technology moves forward all the time, but the energy density of, say, diesel fuel, for example, is just so much greater than like the energy that the same size battery can hold.
Yes.
Like if you looked at the size of the battery that will be required to power a semi-trailer which is going to drive across our continent, say Australia, for example, It's not the same as those drum-sized diesel tanks that are sitting on the side of the, they've got to be huge and they're heavy and they're big.
Yep.
So then you've got to start accounting into that. Well, that truck's got to pull that extra mass of those batteries.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying it can't be done and it's an engineering challenge and people are probably working on it all the time, but
steak wrapped in bacon.
steak wrapped in
I
bacon,
like that one.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
But while we're on that fossil fuel thing, just before we leave that topic, it was interesting that I read somewhere that the Intergovernmental Panel on climate change, the IPCC, they actually state that they want CO2 from fossil fuels reduced to zero by 2100. That's a big ask.
Do you know, I heard
why would we?
I heard a climate scientist saying that if we stopped emitting all carbon today, and it's not a reason not to do it, we wouldn't see any climate change for 100 years, as in any deviation to what we see now.
Yeah.
So it's not like a running water faucet where you turn it off, and it stops straight away.
Yeah.
It's like whatever we've got now, it's not going to change for our lifetime or our children's lifetime.
Yep.
I'm not saying don't do it. Like, I'm not saying if carbon is truly detrimental and it's the only answer, I'm not saying like it's too hard, we shouldn't try. But what I'm saying is, like, it's not like some immediate thing where, one president in one term is going to solve it. We're going to switch off all our emissions. We're going to stop emitting carbon, and then the Earth goes back to, whatever they're chasing.
Well, already, mate, the Earth is there were some NASA reports that stated that the Earth is 15% greener.
Yeah, I saw
since
that.
the year 2000,
Yes.
and that's even in arid areas of the world.
It's like borders of the Southern Sahara and stuff like that are
Yeah.
starting to become lush again.
Since the 1980s, Earth is greener by 40%.
Yeah.
So it's not like the Earth is turning red, like you'd see on every sort of weather map on the news.
Mm-hmm.
The Great Barrier Reef is growing in size. It's not reducing. That's a fact as well.
I heard that. Yeah, is that legit?
Yep. The Earth is.
I hope so. I hope that's true.
Is that because of the stuff we're doing to fix it?
Mate, it's just its natural evolution. It's just its natural. There were some, those star crab, starfish,
Crown of thorns.
crown of thorn
There
things.
was also a lot of bleaching a while ago, wasn't
Yeah,
there?
they
But
talk-
was that due to like
sunscreens, isn't it?
Well,
Due
could
to
have been.
sunscreen?
Yeah.
Mate, it was given so much bullshit stories on mainstream, and that we were probably going back to the times when we were probably paying attention to mainstream.
I mean,
It would have just been a cyclic pattern.
the sun's
within,
putting out more energy,
well, within
or
we just
the ocean's
mentioned
warmer, or
the ocean.
I don't know what causes it.
We just mentioned the ocean changing.
Sunscreen
its-
shit, but it's probably sunscreen.
Yeah, let's go sunscreen.
Well, they were blaming farmers, fertilizers leaching into the ocean.
But
I mean, I've
that's
seen
probably
coral
got some
bleaching. I
legitimacy,
remember seeing an amazing. I went snorkeling sort of on a reef off Hayman Island in Queensland probably 20 years ago, and I remember snorkeling through this amazing, like it was like blue stag coral, I think it was called. It was like this luminescent blue, looked like antlers. And it was amazing, right? It was so vivid, just the brightest, most awesome blue you could ever see. And I saw a sea turtle and whatever. And I went back there about 5 years later, and it's all white and dead now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought, oh, that's bad. So, I mean,
that's
it is happening,
but
but obviously
Yeah.
that's not a representation of
But,
what's
mate-
happening across the entire Earth. And is that a normal natural cycle? I don't know. I'm not
well, because
fucking marine biologist.
reef is like plant life on the land,
yeah,
right?
of course, yeah.
And so if you go and see a beautiful fern in a rainforest one year, and you go back 5 years and that fern is dead,
Yeah.
is that the same? That's the same concept as you going to see an underwater
Of course.
flora species. One time it's alive, and the next time it's dead. I mean, does it mean
Maybe some
anything?
dirty big oil tanker drove across it and had a big leak.
Yeah,
Or-
and look,
I don't know.
And
what
like,
the
I don't
cause
deny
is.
the impact of human traffic either. Like humans
Yeah.
touching reef and stuff like that, and the oils of our skin.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just a lot of factors, and I just don't think you can put it down to climate change as a major thing.
Well, it's just been dumbed down, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's maybe maybe it's the words and the semantics you're talking about, because if you say it's due to fertilizers or even humans touching it or sunscreens or whatever it is, that's impact from humans.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not global warming, maybe it's not, or maybe it is a cycle of the world.
Yeah.
Who knows? But the stuff like even fertilizers into the ocean, the stripping of the soil, the possibility that some of the soil is so dry, maybe is that contributing to some of the floods? Like the soil is so,
yeah.
dry. We've fertilized it. We've killed off the microbiome of the soil with glyphosate. There's no ruminant animals to fertilize and sequester carbon and having that nice, rich, almost muddy soil.
Yeah.
And then
dense with like fungi and all the natural stuff that's supposed to be in there.
Yeah.
And that soaks up the water as it comes through, but that's not happening now. You look at the Middle America, that they call it a dust bowl now. It used to be the bread bowl or the bread basket or whatever they called it.
That's
world.
not an effect on CO2, is it? That's an effect on a lot of other things that we've just talked about.
But that's
core
climate
farming
and
techniques.
us doing bad things to the environment.
Fertilizers, herbicides, all that sort of stuff.
You don't really hear about it in mainstream media. Like, one of the things we really need to do in order to sequester more carbon is to have healthy soil.
Yeah.
Like, I would never hear that when I turn on my news feed or anything like that. Yet they do say that soil will sequester more carbon than anything else. Like healthy soil, it's full of fungi and bacteria and all the rich microbiome that it's got. And they talk about healthy soil as being like a rainforest, and what we've got now is akin to like a desert.
Yeah.
We've got this loose material that we plough every year. We pump it full of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. We put 1 or 2 key nutrients in there for plant growth because we know we can just put the NPK mix in there and a few other things.
Yeah.
We grow it every year. We plough it down. The wind blows it away, and it's essentially holding nothing.
Yeah.
Whereas if you don't plough soil, you keep it intact. You feed it everything it needs.
You let things grow on it.
You let things grow on it. You let things decompose on it. All that sort of stuff. Then it's a rich, healthy, living organism. Which traps a hell of a lot of carbon.
Yes.
And yet we're not doing that in any of our giant, 10,000 hectare corn monocrop.
And the run-on effect of that is, it keeps the water. It holds the water.
Exactly.
It doesn't run
doesn't
off.
Pool and run off.
There's
and mate, that concept, Smitty, is really well explained on a Netflix doco with narrated by Woody Harrelson.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he's a big proponent of this. He believes wholeheartedly in it, and he's actually, he's a good friend of RFK Jr. They get together and talk about issues and have a look at it. I can't remember the name of it.
Is it called Meat?
No, it's not called Meat. If you told me the name of it, I'd remember. It's on Netflix. If you just Google Netflix Woody Harrelson documentary, it'll come up. But that totally explains what you just mentioned there about that soil. There's some great soil.
There are some great resources out there. There's a doco called Sacred Cow, where they, in India cows are sacred, but they're saying the regenerative agriculture based on cows.
No. Cows drink all our water and they shit out methane and they're going to destroy the earth. And you can't eat meat. You got to eat soy. All right, you maniac.
Oh yeah, that's
monocrop. You got to monocrop
that shit. You want to have million-acre farms full of soy.
Yeah, the other one is a really
we'll
good one.
Little boobies and have our oxygen levels sky high. And
2040 is another really good one. It highlights the problems that we've got, but it also gives some solutions. So we're talking about it's a little bit doom and gloom, right? Like you talk about maybe there's only 1 or 2 generations of good quality topsoil left, and
they've lost like 8 feet in areas and crazy things like that.
And we're talking about, I've read some things like we've only got 40 to 50 years of fossil fuels left, and I don't know if that's a scare tactic, but you just mentioned there before, we want to reduce our fossil fuels to zero by 2100. Well, 2100 is more than 50 years away, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we do have more than 50 years of fossil fuels left. Maybe that's a scare tactic, or maybe they're going to move away from fossil fuels and go to another energy source. And that's why if we can hold on to the little stores.
Well, that's the thing. Like, are we evolving as a race? We're always getting a little bit better. Like, we've done a terrible job up until now, right? We've rapidly had this industrial revolution, and we've really fucked up the earth when it comes to, we've lost a lot of pristine areas. We've polluted a lot. Carbon's probably in there somewhere, but on a list of 100 things, it's probably like right down the bottom in my estimation in terms of like its importance. I'm not saying we shouldn't pay attention to it, but I don't think it's like the one thing we can solve. But as a society, are we also going to get better and find more efficient ways?
Yeah,
like
humans are
all doom and
resilient,
gloom,
right?
because we love as humans to always take in the most negative aspect of what's going to happen. We're doom and gloom people. Like, if you have a positive thing and a negative thing on the table, we always go towards the negative thing. That's what attracts us.
Yeah.
And I think it's because we know we're going to die. So we're always looking for negative information. Like, I look at my dog. She doesn't know she's going to die. Neither does a butterfly, a bird, a horse. As humans, we know we're fragile. We know there's a ton of things that can kill us, and we know we're going to die. So I think we're always gravitating towards that negative information to safeguard ourselves.
Yeah.
You always want to know what the worst case scenario is so that you can protect yourself. So, fuck, there could be a really big hurricane come one day. I'm going to build a really strong house. Or there could be a financial collapse. I'm going to have heaps of money. I'm going to stockpile cash. There could be a fucking virus. I'm going to get some crazy vaccine that might be untested. Fuck it, I'm just going to do it. Whatever it is, we're always looking to safeguard ourselves.
Well, that's what insurance is based on.
That's what insurance is based on, right? But as humans,
insecurities.
As humans, we love the media have worked this out, right? We love negative information. That's why when you turn the news on, an old lady was bashed and the financial system's fucked. We're all going to die, and bushfires are getting worse and worse every year, and the climate's going to collapse. Well, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe there's a middle ground.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we're doing a great job, but at the same time, we hear about this tipping point. We're going to hit this tipping point, and all of a sudden the whole world turns red. Every day is going to be 50 degrees. The ocean's going to rise 10 meters, and we're all going to die. Well, there's got to be a middle ground.
Would there be good waves though?
And Smitty, what you're saying there is so critical, mate, because I just heard on the news just recently a kid in the US committed suicide because he felt so despaired about the environment and the fact that he couldn't do anything about it. And I think this whole media scare tactics, and you listen to some scientists, and I listen to a lot of podcasts coming into this, and there's a few good scientists on Jordan Peterson's podcast, and they speak alternate views, but they're very balanced. But even whatever view they come from, they speak about humans adapting.
Yes.
And the consequences of what's happening aren't massive. They aren't severe. They are not massive consequences that's going to mass extinct the world in 100 years.
There is people talking like that though.
I know there is, mate, and that's the
and
terrible
there always
thing.
Has been.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
I see what you're
exactly.
saying. Yeah.
Because back in the 80s, and I saw this little post on it, the 80s it had
80s was acid rain. Remember acid
rain?
rain?
Yeah. In the 90s, there was something else. In the year 2000s, there was something else. There were these decades of different topics.
There's holes in the ozone layer.
Ozone layer.
We're all going to be simmering with boils if we walked out in the sun for 2 minutes.
Exactly, mate. Every decade, there is this scare tactic to just keep this little thing bubbling.
There's
under
global
the
famine.
surface.
We can't support the amount of people we have on the earth. We've never grown as much food as we are now, and part of this due to the global greening.
Exactly
And
right,
wastage.
mate.
India
Exactly.
won't be able to support themselves. They can't grow enough food. They've never grown more food, and they're supporting 1.3 billion people or whatever.
I heard somewhere there was a quote by year 2000 that some great percentage of the world would be dead from starvation, which never happened.
Sea level rise
Yeah, sea levels
has happened a little bit, but not appreciably.
Yeah, so all these points, what I'm getting at is it's now impacting, because remember in our education podcast we talked about sustainability and how our kids at school are being indoctrinated with this belief that the world is in massive danger and it's going to end if we don't do something about it, blah, blah, blah. It's having an impact on their psychology. There are people in society that aren't having children because they believe that what's the point of having children if the world's going to end because of climate change.
Yep.
This climate change mantra has totally, absolutely fucked people in the head. It's just like COVID. And that's why I said at the start, this is the new COVID, because it's just been a mass psychosis of this thing that, yes, this is happening. And yes, COVID happened as well. I'm not denying that COVID happened and it killed some vulnerable people.
Look at the modelling for COVID when it first came out.
Let's talk about modelling, mate. Hey, man.
Yeah,
But that's what they did. They made COVID a number, and it's the same with carbon.
Yeah.
Right? So they
It
made
is.
COVID a number, and every night politicians on the thing going,
Yep.
geez, we had 10,000 yesterday. And
Yep.
everyone's like, oh, right,
It was the
10,000.
same thing, mate. Create a crisis and have them provide the solution to us so that we all live in fear, and then thank God the government's come to save us with a solution.
We talk about COVID and the environment. You look at what that did with public health, the cost of face masks, vaccines, rat tests, the plastic waste from all of that.
Man, imagine
Yeah.
the pollution
It was
just from the rat
horrendous.
tests and the masks.
Yeah.
They reckon
My
there's something like
God.
1 billion masks in the ocean now.
Yeah.
Man,
But, mate, the
okay.
government doesn't give a fuck about the environment, because look at that Nord Stream pipeline that was blown up allegedly by Putin. That was full. Americans have admitted to that pretty much. That had the biggest environmental impact, they reckon, since It was something major. I can't remember what it was, but the amount of methane that was emitted into the ocean and destroyed so much marine life after that explosion was phenomenal.
Mate, look at that train crash in America, that
Yeah.
vinyl chloride train. Oh, geez, this is going to be hard to clean up. What do? Let's light it on fire.
Yeah. And did you see the local rivers
That'll
there?
clean her up.
The local rivers
my
had
God.
rainbow film all over it, and
Oh.
fish were dying. You know, like
That's the stuff that really worry. I'm a little bit worried about carbon, but it's really low down on my list compared to all the other things we're doing, which
Does
are
not-
crazy.
does
You
not
know?
register
Like
with
I
me.
get a bottle of water from the servo on the way home, chuck it, plastic.
Yeah,
We're eating plastic now and all the fish we have.
yeah. Like I wouldn't eat
Crazy.
a fish out of my river.
Oh, no, God, no.
No, mainly when it's closer to the river mouth, maybe I would, where it's
Yeah.
a bit cleaner. But upstream, I wouldn't eat a fish.
We live in the country. I wouldn't eat the yabbies and stuff out of my creek because there's farms upstream and all the runoff from the farms, all the chemicals, and I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't drink the water either.
Yep.
No.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about with it not being one
Nah.
issue. It's
Nah.
a myriad of issues,
Yeah.
and that sole focus on emissions and carbon, which may or may not be a problem. I think we probably disagree on that. I'm no expert, but I would think that it would be having some sort of impact on the climate.
I think it definitely has an impact. I just don't think it's as big as what they state.
Yeah, and when you start putting figures on it, and
I've heard some scientists quantify the effect of increased carbon in the atmosphere in terms of watts per square metre of energy, and obviously the more watts per square metre cause an increase in temperature. And what they were saying is, based on the current figures and the future projections of what our carbon output will be, they reckon that it might increase, I think it's watts per square metre by 1 to 2, right? About 1 to 2. Now, things like the sun, the ocean currents, volcanoes, things like that can increase it by like 100 watts per square metre. So it's not like it's not having an impact, but it's like, what is the impact in terms of, we're talking about, there seems to be a relative scientific consensus that over the next 100 years we might get between 1 and 2 degrees of warming. But what component of that is coming from carbon? I'm not saying let's all go crazy and just emit carbon left, right, and centre and not try and change our ways, but like the impact of making energy really, really expensive overnight to achieve these goals is that we go backwards as a society. Like you look at the amount of carbon we've emitted over the last 100 years, and it's been obviously quite a bit. But you also look at the increase in the standard of living. We've got refrigeration, we've got transport, we've got heating and cooling, we've got all these things that also make us able to be more healthy and live a better life. There's got to be a technological balance and a shift to other things that isn't this mass psychosis and paranoia of just let's change everything now, let's burn it all down, we're all going to go and live back in mud huts.
It needs to be a gradual change, not this overnight change to everything electrical.
Yeah, but let's also look at all the other things that we're messing up.
Yeah.
Let's not just look at carbon then go, hey, like, because that's like this sustainability argument. Well, let's sustain what we're doing. Fuck it, let's not sustain what we're doing. Let's do a lot better.
Well, what is sustainability?
Sustainability is a fucking terrible word. I don't want to sustain what we're doing now because we are
funny word, isn't it?
Ravaging and raping the earth.
If we sustain what we've got now,
Terrible.
what does that look like in the future?
We are ruined. We're absolutely ruined.
Are we living in bubbles like that movie WALL-E?
Mate, we will. We'll be living under a glass dome with giant carbon scrubbers everywhere going, whoa, carbon levels are low. Whoa, gee, we're doing really well. There's no biodiversity.
Ocean,
We've
can't
got no
get out in nature.
It'll be terrible.
That's not how you want to
Let's
live.
not aim to sustain what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Let's aim to move forward technologically better. Like, let's look at things like nuclear. Like, some people hate nuclear energy. Well, it doesn't generate any fucking carbon.
Yeah.
So let's start looking at it and you go, okay, it generates some nuclear waste. So do the submarines that Australia's just about to build.
Yep.
I don't see people going, some people go nuts about that, but the media generally is very...
People are scared. People are scared of nuclear, aren't they?
Well, they're scared of nuclear, but they don't seem to. The media narrative doesn't seem to be scared of these nuclear subs. It seems to be like, Australia is safeguarding our future in the Pacific region, and we need to, project force, and we've got this. None of the media people are going, oh, geez, it's going to generate a bit of nuclear waste in the future. I don't know how many subs we're building, but I assume it's several. I assume we wouldn't just build like 1 or 2. Do you guys know how many subs we're getting in Australia?
No idea,
must be a fleet. Must be at
30?
least a dozen or something like that.
Is that a guess?
Build fucking 30 nuclear power stations. Build them really safe. World's best standard, not crazy Chernobyl era,
and that's where a lot of the fear comes from.
Don't build it on a
3
fucking...
Mile Island, Chernobyl.
Don't burn it on don't build it on an earthquake
even.
zone. Don't build it right next to where a fucking tidal wave's going to hit it. Put multiple sensors in place. They reckon it's essentially very, very, very safe.
Well, if you look at Chernobyl, the technology that we've got since that happened must be through the roof. They still had rotary phones back then.
Oh,
you
man,
They
know,
were doing
like-
they were doing some wild experiment
It was
outside
built
of
in
their
the 60s
parameters
or
and doing something they weren't
Built in
supposed
the
to.
That's right,
50s or
yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
It's
Surely our technology is better than.
Yeah, and they're even talking now of because most of the nuclear reactors that have been built around the world are all sort of custom built. Now they're talking about like modular design. So it'll be the exact same design. Everything will be the same, and each reactor placed in various parts around the world. So if something goes wrong with one, it will apply to all the other.
You've
all
got
the
that
others.
economy of scale, right? So
Yeah.
you're not like doing a clean sheet design for each one. You're
Yeah.
going, this is our cookie cutter design.
Yep.
Bang, 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 bang,
Yeah,
bang.
they're all exactly the same. If something goes wrong with one of them, we can then address that with all the others because they're
Yep.
exactly the same, which makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I mean, nuclear to me is the answer to everything. You know, like
At least for now.
Yeah.
I'm not saying like you do it forever, but like we do need to do better with, like I'm more worried about air pollution than I am specifically probably carbon, like diesel particulate.
Yeah.
You know, it's a known carcinogen. We know it's not
It's not good for your health.
yeah,
Terrible, right? If I had to breathe in either a little bit of CO2 or some diesel particulate, talking from a very selfish point of view, I'd go for the CO2 right now. It's not going to do anything to me.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
breathing out 4% CO2 in this room right now, 4%,
Yeah.
and we're worried about 0.04% in the atmosphere. Well, it's not going to kill us if it goes a bit higher. Massive diesel particulate or, you know, those, what do they call them? Like PM 2.5 sort of particles from different combustion. That's quite bad for us, right?
Yeah.
We know that.
well, mate, that's a good point you make. When we're talking about pollutants and we're talking about air pollution, 2021 Environmental Protection Authority in the US, they listed the greenhouse emissions by economic sector, and number one was transport at 28%.
Yeah.
So there's your diesel emissions, Jonesy, your
Transport.
your,
Yeah.
your cruise ships and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Planes.
Number two was electric power at 25%, and underneath that was industry at 23%. Now those two you can probably combine because a lot of
Which two, mate?
electric
Sorry, I
power,
lost you.
electric power and industry.
Okay, yep.
So most electric power is used by industry compared to
yes.
residential.
Yep.
So combine those two, that's 48%.
So like a factory that's powered by electric and then it goes on to make its own pollutants sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, and powered pretty much 24/7. You know, it's not like we leave the house during the day to go to work and there's nothing really operating. These things operate 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Number four was commercial residential at 3%. 13% commercial residential.
Commercial. So is that houses, like houses that people live in? Commercial residential.
Yep.
Okay.
So industry, factories and stuff, commercial, like, a shopping centre or
Oh, I see, yep.
like a grocery store or something, and residential. Agriculture was 10%. That was the lowest one. Total emissions have decreased since 1990 amongst all those sectors. So they've decreased.
That's probably because we've put a major highlight on them and said we need to reduce them,
Yeah.
right? Is that what you?
But what
saying?
I find interesting though is commercial and residential at number 4 at 13%. We're made to feel that we're the ones need to make the changes. Like we've got to buy the solar panels, we've got to change our light bulbs, we've got to do this and operate things during the day to utilise our solar power. Well, I don't work in an industry, but I'd like to know what policies are being implemented at an industry level or at a major national transport level to negate these pollutants.
I'd say very few, mate. It seems like user pays these days. Like the end user is the one that picks up the bill.
Isn't that ridiculous?
Like you, as the dirty consumer,
Yeah.
if you're going to buy my dirty product, you're going to pay for it, Mr.
Yeah.
Dirty.
I find
well, how
that
come the
so egregious. It's
industry doesn't,
ridiculous. Hey,
Yeah.
like you look at the big supermarkets and they go in. Would you like to put $2 on the end of your pay or what you've just paid for your groceries to offset your carbon? No. How about you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do I pay for that?
Yep.
Well, the groceries will have to go up.
It's like Qantas just makes, what was Qantas' last profit? Was it $500 million or something?
Yeah.
It was quite a lot of money.
Do you want to pay $5 extra on your ticket to
Yeah, plant a couple of
be green,
trees.
carbon neutral?
Yeah.
And while we're talking about air pollution, on that list is not chemtrails. I'd like to know what sort of effect on the environment and our air pollution chemtrails have, because that is a known fact.
Well,
and they've done
hang on.
they've
If
done
you're saying emissions have nothing to do with global warming, how can you suggest that chemtrails do? And environmental change.
No, I'm not saying that pollutants or chemicals have no change on the
I
climate.
thought that's what you were saying earlier about emissions.
I think we're just saying it might be overstated. With
No,
the
I'm
whole
saying
argument
particularly
is,
CO2.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
saying
Yeah, yeah.
particularly, and as we've said multiple times, CO2 is not the prime
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, sorry.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
bad guy here.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, but you look at all the aluminium particles that
yeah.
are spread in chemtrails, amongst other metal oxides and all that sort of shit that they spray from the back of military aircraft in particular to change our weather. And is that a major cause of climate change? What they're doing with chemtrails? Because they've admitted to that they want to block out the sun. They want to reduce the sun's rays on the earth, and to do that, they can create a film of metal alloy or metal oxides.
Yeah, I got it here, Roo. So here's a Forbes article from 2021, January 2021. So Bill Gates financially backing the development of some sun-dimming technology that will potentially reflect sunlight out of the Earth's atmosphere, triggering a global cooling effect. So they're basically looking at, in the upper atmosphere, and this is backed by Harvard University scientists, they're aiming to examine the solution of global warming by spraying non-toxic calcium carbonate dust into the atmosphere to reflect the sun. That sounds like a dystopian nightmare to me, because we do not understand what that's going to do.
Oh, but it's non-toxic though, mate.
It's like the Simpsons episode where Mr. Burns blocks out the sun.
The sun is the center of everything.
Without the sun, everything on Earth dies.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want some evil genius. No, retract that. Some evil guy
Computer nerd.
spraying some sort of calcium carbonate compound into our upper atmosphere with we don't even know. Like, weather modelling, and we're going to get into this, I assume, is very imprecise. Everyone admits that. It's just a best guess.
Yeah, it is.
But it is so complicated, nobody can predict exactly what's going to happen.
No.
Yeah, we can predict the weather 7 days out, whatever. But on a global scale, in terms of what's happening, we don't know.
No.
Because there's so many inputs. There's, as I spoke about, there's ocean, there's cloud,
People are
there's solar input, there's
Yeah.
obviously the what do they call it? Anthropogenic effect, the human-made effect of our change on climate. There are so many different things, but the computer models really can't even predict what's happening before you start doing crazy shit like spraying shit into the atmosphere. Like, is there a global vote on this, or are they just going to do that?
It's
Like,
happening.
They're
It's
doing
happening,
it,
man.
They're doing it.
Look,
my God. I mean,
and-
that's terrifying.
I think, is it better to call it cloud seeding than chemtrails? Because chemtrails is kind of sound like a bit of a conspiracy theorist. But if you look at cloud seeding, it's
Cloud seeding's a nice term, isn't
I
it?
know.
Because they're making nice fluffy clouds. Which is
they're doing it.
horseshit.
They're starting tomorrow in Penang to fill island dams that have got no water in them. So if someone says to you cloud seeding, that's bullshit, mate. It's happening.
Did you see that there's a...
It's on the Water Corp, Western Australian Water Corporation.
Yes.
You can look up cloud seeding. It's the process of artificially generating rain by implanting clouds with particles such as silver iodide crystals. After extensive testing, the CSIRO has determined cloud seeding is unlikely to have much effect in Australia.
Well,
However,
did you see,
it's
sorry. written
written there, right? You're not
However,
a
what?
crazy conspiracy theorist. It's
However, what does it say there?
it said, however, it
We have no idea what it's
We have
going
no
to do.
idea.
yeah.
I'll have to take that on notice. Yeah.
It's unlikely to be effective. Cloud seeding is usually carried out by sprinkling particles from a plane.
Yep.
I mean, that's 100% going on.
Yeah.
But
The
did you
US
see in Australia, let's bring this back to, because we're an Australian podcast, there was a big controversy about that going on in Tasmania just before a giant weather front came in, and there was mass flooding. And there's like some inquest into like, why the hell are we doing this?
Why are we changing the weather patterns?
Well, ahead of like a major front, which caused like some quite destructive floods.
And we're also talking talking
climate
about
manipulation.
Exactly, mate. And have you guys heard about the recent Bureau of Meteorology? There's a
Bomb.
couple of tricky words. Let's just call it the BOM, the Bureau of Meteorology. Have you heard about what's going on with that mob? So obviously, they've for many years taken temperature readings and so on to provide us information on the temperature. At some point, they changed their recording mechanisms from the traditional mercury thermometers to electronic probes.
Makes sense.
But there is a difference. There's a differential between those readings. So there's a difference of 0.75%. All right, now that 0.75% is important because that's
degrees.
around half of the 1.5% of global warming alarmism. Okay, if we hit 1.5% global temperature increase, we're up the shit. So the difference here in the BOM measuring
probes.
is these recording apparatus is 0.75. But the thing was, they misled Australian Parliament and the public by not releasing that information. And so my question is, why would they want to retain this? It wasn't until a woman, I don't know her credentials or her name, but she applied for a freedom of information.
Fucking conspiracy theorist right there.
She applied for
Anyone
freedom of
that applies for
information.
one of those.
It was refused. They refused to give out the information. It went to a level higher.
I didn't think they were allowed to do that. I
Yeah.
thought FOI was...
Mate, they did.
Yeah.
But it went to a level higher and they had to provide this information. Why they would want to keep that a secret, I don't know. And also, during the last summer that we had, 2022, 2023, in the New South Wales or Sydney Bureau of Meteorology, they actually had quite a large, say a metre by a metre silver panel reflecting from the sun onto its temperature reading. And there was photographic evidence of this. And when it was shared on like alternative media sites, it was very quickly removed. But that sat there for up to a few days before a photo was taken of it. Why would they want to reflect the sun's rays and increase its intensity via some sort of solar panel or reflective apparatus onto its temperature gauge?
Yeah, mate, there's also an argument that I've heard along some, I don't want to call them deniers, but scientists with alternative views, and they're saying that we've got all these weather stations all around the world, right, which all collect weather data, and then we get this, I think it's called like global mean temperature or something like that. They take all the data from all the stations around the world, they're all collecting all this stuff, and then they average it, and then they can get, like an average global temperature, and then they can say it's going up, down, sideways, whatever. Well, there's some... I think, very valid theory, which says that, like, obviously these weather stations and centres have been built some time ago. Usually, or often, they're built in an urban space, close to a city, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to build one 500 kilometres away from a city. So they're going to be within
or an airport, defence airport.
Or at an airport. We've got one at our airport. Most airports have one, for example, and there's a number of others all around the place. Well, when you start urbanising and building, that actually sucks in and retains more heat and actually does artificially manipulate the temperature reading. Like you go and touch a road after a hot day, it remains hot for a while.
Yep.
Your house after 30, all that stuff has a cumulative effect, and it can actually change the temperature by a little bit.
Definitely.
Now, again, I'm not saying the temperature's changing. I think it is, but
we didn't have any days in
But, mate,
Perth over 40 this year.
Yeah,
No, we didn't.
And look, I've got a couple of stats here, mate.
And that happened in Sydney, didn't they?
When you say the temperature is...
Sydney was very mild this year.
They didn't get above 30.
Well, here we go.
Yeah.
Look, Sydney, 2022, the highest temperature was 31.9 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
But their whole December of 2022, it did not exceed 30 degrees. In Brisbane, the top of 18.3, the coldest day in October in 23 years.
Yep.
Australia's 2022-23 summer was minus 0.5 degrees below a decade average.
Yeah,
Right,
so that's
so when
quite
you
significant, below a decade average.
A
Yeah,
decade
yeah.
average. Melbourne had its coldest Easter this year, so only a few weeks ago, since the 1920s. And it just so happened that later in the afternoon, it just ticked over by 0.1 of a degree. But pretty much the
So
coldest...
maybe if they were using mercury, it might not have ticked over by
Yeah,
0.1
exactly.
of a degree. Yeah.
In the US, the Jackson Ski Resort in Wyoming, official snowiest 2022-23 winter season in recorded history.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Recorded snowfall across the USA, ski resorts recording staggering snowfalls. The Mammoth Mountain in California recorded its snowiest winter in recorded history ever. So when we're saying that, and this is why they've changed the term global warming to climate change, because the globe is not warming.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is warming a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the natural cycle, is
But maybe
what
that's
you're talking about.
Yeah.
Do you guys know in the 70s there was quite a concern about global cooling?
Yeah, there was. Yeah.
And the globe did cool
Yeah.
through the 70s, and they started saying, it's all
I heard
the coal-fired power plants. They're reflecting the sun's energy because of all the particulate in the sky, and that's the cause of it, and doom and gloom. And by the way, global cooling is a much bigger threat to
Yeah.
humanity than global warming is.
Yeah,
It's a much
exactly.
bigger threat.
I'd rather be warm than cold.
Yeah, but from a like sustainability, not
Yeah.
sustainability, from a ecological point of view, global
Right,
cooling
yeah.
is much worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much
Well,
worse.
things thrive when it's warm.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, look at the
Exactly.
dinosaurs. When that big asteroid hit and it blocked out the sun, everything just
Mm.
went cold and died.
Yeah.
Mm.
Not
Yeah,
cockroaches.
No, those little buggers.
Little fighters. They're survivors.
Yeah, you can step on those
Be more
fuckers
like a
and they'll
cockroach.
still keep going, eh?
Emit that black shit out the
Yeah.
back, and
You
then
can chop
gotta-
their head off, and their body will still be running around. Even their head's just like the antennas still flicking around. Hey, but how's this? Looking at countries, polluting countries. So, what would you say would be your number one polluting country?
China.
Boom.
India.
China, 30% of all global emissions. That's 10 million tons of global emissions. I'm not going to say CO2, of global emissions. Number 2 was USA, and that's 14%.
USA.
14%, so compared to
That'd be number
30%. So China is double.
So, but per capita, because China has a lot bigger population
Yeah.
than the States, you would say the US is the worst.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, yeah. So
Well, I don't know. Maybe Australia's worse. I don't know. Like,
Well, let's
we're
look at the
probably
tonnage. So USA, 5 million tonnes of global emissions. India was number 3 at 2.5 million tonnes.
So the States was more than India.
Yep.
Because India's got, what's India now, like 1.3 billion people or
Yeah.
something? They've got a lot, don't they?
Yeah. Then Russia and Japan. So it's interesting that China, I mean, do you call them a developing country? India is a developing country. You've got 3 countries there that, I don't know, it just seems that the Western world are the ones that are getting hit with all the changes that need to be made. You know, we're the ones that are putting solar panels in fields and wind farms and that sort of thing. And it's interesting that China refused the changes to the Paris Agreement.
Yeah.
They're increasing coal-fire power stations by 8 to every one that we close.
Yeah.
So they're building multiple
We'll take
coal-fire
your coal.
stations. Yeah. How's this for a stat? China has produced 80 billion tonnes of CO2 emissions, so we're going back to CO2 emissions, between 2013 and 2020. So in a 7-year period, 8 billion tonnes. Compare that, the UK produced 78 billion tonnes, but that's from 1750 to the year 2020.
I think that's where this climate alarmism comes, isn't it? It's people saying, like, we've got this exponential rise. It's not like this gradual. It's like we are ramping up hard, and if we keep going, like maybe there's a problem. Like maybe there is. I don't know. I don't know.
How's Australia
I don't
going?
think anyone really knows.
But yeah, the other countries are doing whatever they want, is what you're saying. isn't
Yeah.
it? And they're, we're the ones that are doing the right thing, so to speak.
Well, are we?
Well, I don't
are
know.
we really?
Well, probably not. But
Like I'm
you know what
driving
I
on the
mean.
road here, and there's all bloody bogans with their diesel-powered utes that had DPF deletes and puffing out soot everywhere, and like,
Now we've lost the bogan audience, mate.
well, whatever.
According to the
I'm just going to try and ostracise every single demographic.
according to our CSIRO, a carbon audit in 2013, Dr. Vanessa Havard from the CSIRO Marine and Atmosphere Research stated that on average, 2.2 billion tonnes of CO2 are taken up by vegetation every year in Australia.
Sequestered.
So
Yep.
So it's drawn back in from the atmosphere. Australians emit an average of 485 million tonnes of CO2 per year. So 2.2 billion tonnes of CO2 is sucked back in by vegetation. 485 million tonnes is what we release.
So we're already more than carbon neutral.
Mate,
We're carbon
Senator
negative.
Jared Rennick said that at a Senate estimate that we are already at net zero.
So let's
Go
stop
on by
worrying about
those
carbon
figures.
and start worrying about the other forms of pollution. I'd be much happier with that.
Yeah. Australian Department of Energy data shows that Australia is down 25% across all those economic sectors that I mentioned before for emissions since 2007.
Even if you throw the nuclear argument out the window, we've got a hell of a lot of natural gas in Australia.
Yeah.
Like
Wow.
we've got the
Yeah.
Gorgon project, which ships it in off the coast. We export a hell of a lot of LNG. My understanding is that burns reasonably clean.
Yeah.
Like you can never alter that to not emit CO2, carbon. But in terms of emissions, it's quite a clean burning fuel,
Yeah.
I understand.
And
It's
don't
not
we-
like a dirty old diesel truck or anything like that. We can clearly make vehicles that run on LNG.
Yeah.
I remember taxis for a long time. You get an
Exactly.
Buses
LNG
did it.
taxi.
Yeah.
Buses did it.
The conversion was expensive. That's what turned people off.
Yeah,
But the actual
but once it was there, I mean, those things are quite clean.
Yeah. But we ship most of it off to China, don't we? Our natural gas.
Yeah, probably.
Aren't they our biggest natural gas
I would say so, yeah.
importers?
Yeah, maybe Europe now because of the energy crisis over there with Russia. I don't know if they're getting a bit more or... But, I mean, that seems like a clean energy, but you never hear about it. It seems to be on the decline. I remember every man and his dog, maybe 10 years ago, was converting to LPG. There was, like, government initiatives to do it, and they'd sort of, like, pretty much foot the bill. It was very cheap or quite cheap there for a while to run your vehicle on it. And now it's just kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
Well, if we're really serious about saving the environment, not just freaking out about carbon, like, why aren't we looking at stuff like this?
Yeah.
Like, where's the political will to do that?
Because you're not getting rid of cars. You're not getting rid of transport.
You can't.
You got to, like you said, think of a solution that's going to be a cleaner burning energy.
Yeah, well, we're looking at a world now where they're talking about you've got to have this global supply chain. They're saying, like, it's outdated to have a warehouse in your city which supplies you. We've got to look at this global supply chain. Well, if we're looking at a global supply chain, then we need transport.
Yeah.
If we need transport, then we need energy. You know, for now, like, wind and the sun isn't getting it done.
No.
And even if it is, it seems like it's a finite resource. They've got all these... rare earth elements and precious metals and stuff that go into it. Well, that stuff, I understand, is eventually going to run out. Like, we've got to mine it. We've got to make these dirty, big, polluting mines, giant holes in the ground.
And look at the environmental impact on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
well, we can talk about that. Are we going to talk about net zero next episode, or is that because that is that?
What do you mean net zero? Well, renewables and shit like that.
Yeah. Well, just that point in general. That's a whole
using
topic
alternative energy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
yeah, we'll even just jump into it now.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's do it. So
Let's do it.
that the whole mining thing, or if we want to be at net zero, he's actually an Australian guy. He's called Dr. Simon Michaux, Michaux. He was in the mining industry here. He now works for University of Finland or someone like that, but he's got a degree in physics. He then did a diploma in explosives or something like that. Anyway, so he's pretty big on this. How are we going to get to net zero? What does that even look like?
Yeah.
If you wanted to get to net zero, and you want to decouple from this carbon system, how are we going to do that? And if your only solutions that are being put forward are these green renewables like solar and wind, we don't like water. We don't, hydro. You've got to move things around. You've got to move waterways. You've got to have powerful rivers, etc. So people don't like those. Geothermal only works in some spots. What does it look like to get to net zero just using wind and solar? And he's suggesting we need 2.1 million new wind turbines and 27.6 billion new solar panels. To get to that point, we need to then mine 4.5 billion tons of copper, and that is 5 times more than all of the copper that we know is there at the moment in the world.
Yeah.
So if you look at the Andes Mountains, they are copper. There's a lot of copper in them. But to get that copper out, and the mining that it takes is so inefficient. We talk about steak, bacon wrapped in steak versus lettuce. This is the lettuce. We've got to rip down the Andes Mountains to get enough copper to make these new solar panels. So in the 1800s, they were pulling chunks of copper out of deposits that were as big as a Volkswagen Beetle, right? Big chunks of copper. That's efficient enough to get a few big things of them, a big ore, grind them down, whatever they need to do. But now we're getting these small chunks. The machines are cranking up. They're working harder. There's more grinding. You're getting all of this. You talk about the emissions from transport and stuff. When we look at renewables or green, it's green renewables like solar and wind, you don't factor in these things. Like, how do we get the materials, the transport that it takes? Those things aren't factored into emissions.
You're paying a massive price up front, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'm not saying they're bad or solar on my house is great. It reduced my energy costs. It makes sense for me to have solar on my roof, offsetting using the energy, but the grid. But if we're going to not have any fossil fuels or not, we talked about nuclear. If we're nuclear, if we're gonna have, we need some other energy sources. Yeah. And it seems like nuclear is the way to go. But this guy was also saying that it takes about 25 years to get a nuclear power plant up and running. Mm-hmm. And that's even if, you don't have Mr. Burns running it.
Yeah, look at the speed in which the Europeans have repositioned after this war with Ukraine and Russia and their energy crisis over there. I believe if the political will was there, we could get one going a lot quicker than that.
Oh, and he did suggest that, but yeah, people are worried about this.
We're investing so much money in those renewables for little return, basically. Yeah. That's what we're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, and he's sort of asking this question, well, how are we going to get there?
Yeah.
We can't just shut off fossil fuel like that.
No.
And not, maybe you want to have a graduated end to them, but what does that look like? 2.1 million wind turbines. And where do you put those?
Yeah.
So you've got to have the land, you've got to have the wind power to do that. And what's the environmental impact of that?
Well,
because they kill a lot of birds.
Mate. Yeah.
I
had a look at that because that was a concern to me. But before we look into that, just looking at the investment put into renewables, the US government between 2009 and 2015 invested $150 billion in renewable energy. Subsidies in renewables like solar and wind have increased energy costs. So in California, from 2011 to 2019, cost of solar panels and wind turbines have decreased, yet energy costs have increased by 5 times, more than anywhere else in the USA. In Germany, who are massive leaders in renewables, they had a real big push, had a 50% increase in energy costs during 2006 and 2018, which was their period of big renewable push. So for the investment that they're getting, I mean, solar and wind are intermittent energy sources. And
there's no solar at night.
I saw a figure, they only produce electricity 10 to 30% of the time most of the year. So very unreliable, very inefficient. And when you talk about, let's have a look at the impacts. So you just mentioned there, Jonesy, bird species and bats killed by wind turbines. There's thousands of bat species now nearing extinction. There's birds, eagles, owls, hawks, kestrels, kites. There are multitudes of those killed every year. They reckon that even the bats are killed by the pressure emitting from the blades of those things internally blows up their intestines.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're talking about sort of like the pressure difference between the front and the back of the blade, sort of like what an airplane wing makes?
Yes.
Is that the sort of, wow,
yeah.
okay. So I haven't looked into this at all. So.
Yeah.
Wow.
No idea. Yeah.
That makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, in California, the largest solar panel farm is called the Ivanpah. IVA, I didn't quite get the spelling, but Ivanpah is pronounced. Required wildlife to be literally picked up, put onto trucks and removed. There were hundreds of desert tortoises removed and placed onto trucks and moved into captivity. Most of them died. 6,000 birds in the US are killed every year by electrocution, and they're set on fire by solar panels.
They land on them
Bzz, red rooster. So, and what I'd like to know is, where are all your animal welfare activists and environmentalists now when all this shit goes on? So are we being we're destroying the environment to protect global warming or change our energy?
Yeah.
It's just not.
I reckon we're all in agreement there. We're so narrow in our focus. The only fucking thing you ever hear about on the media is carbon emissions. Get carbon.
Yeah.
Got to have solar.
What about these species of bats that now are
electric
nearly
cars.
extinct?
Yeah.
Yeah,
we don't hear about that.
Yeah, we're very narrow-minded, narrow-focused. And
And
again, like Jonesy said, it's a political thing. You can put a number on it. Everyone feels good. We all high-five each other.
Yeah.
Hey, carbon.
Yeah.
Carbon neutral.
The other thing is you need the fossil fuel generation. The fossil fuels you need to make the solar and wind in production.
Yeah.
So you need the steak wrapped in bacon energy and oomph to make all these things in production.
And using these finite elements, like you were saying, Do we mine the whole Andes ranges in South America and absolutely destroy that whole part of the world in order to get enough copper? And then we also need our lithium, our nickel, our cobalt, all those other things. That stuff's going to run out eventually.
Well, that's the other mind-blowing thing,
So
right?
we pillage and rape the earth, maybe get a couple of generations full of it, and then go, oh, that doesn't work. We haven't got it.
So this number that this doctor had come up with, 2.1 million new wind turbines, 26 billion. We need 5 times more of what we've got now. That is one generation. So that's to make it go for 30 years. Wow. And then after 30 years, we need to find that number again. Wow. That to me just blew my mind. I was like, that is crazy. You can find this. It's a 1,000-page document. I actually listened to a podcast on it called Decouple, which is trying to get or find solutions. So we talk about young people being scared into, what's the future look like? There are young people doing good things, and this Decouple,
definitely,
I think they'll come up with some solutions. And it's not all doom and gloom. There is things going on, but we need to change the viewpoint. And this Decouple podcast, this guy was a guest on it. It was really, really good. So if anyone's really interested in it, they go into how are we going to decouple or get away from the fossil fuel system and this carbon cycle that we always talk about. So, yeah, it really quite interesting. He also talked about, this nuclear building. People are worried about a Chernobyl or a 3 Mile Island, and we haven't really fully developed that technology like we should have and come up with solutions. So like a Gen 3, Gen 4 nuclear reactor, you'll be able to then use the waste from the previous reactors.
I read something about that, mate. Yeah, so
it'll be, the waste will be the size of a pen.
Yeah. And waste generally erodes away around 100 years. And so 100 years when we're talking about all this sort of stuff is minuscule, really, when you're talking about something that's the size of a pen that can be stored underground
and possibly
reused. monitored.
I've heard that, because don't they only use like 5% of the energy from the nuclear fuel or something like that? So you could potentially even dig it up and reuse it.
Yeah,
technology gets.
That's what we're talking about
when
doing.
Tech gets better. Yeah,
that's what they're talking about doing. I think nuclear is something that we really need to look at. And I was having a look at
Like, you want to talk about energy density? I'm pretty sure nuclear is right there, isn't it? Like, that's steak wrapped in.
Yeah,
lard, wrapped in bacon, wrapped in butter, wrapped in cream.
But everyone's worried, aren't they? You get those. You see those. You look at The Simpsons. We've referenced them again, but the tubs of the 4x4 gallon drum of that toxic sludge waste, and you're thinking
Mr. Burns hiding it in a tree in the children's park,
and then the
all
three-eyed fish.
children.
So
well, it's twice as it produces twice as much electricity for less dollars.
Yeah. We want solutions. Well, here's one of them.
Well, let's go down a very small conspiracy rabbit hole here. Do the powers that be, whoever that may be, not want us to have cheap energy?
Probably. They have then the power, don't they?
Yeah, well, like if you sort of impoverish people and put them back and keep them battling, and energy is expensive and it's hard to get ahead, is that more beneficial? Yeah. Maybe we need to make 15-minute cities and we can never travel. And
Well, you control energy and food. You control the world, mate. You control the people, don't you?
Yeah, I mean,
you'll own nothing.
Maybe if we have a really sophisticated hybrid system of predominantly nuclear, and then we've got some renewables in there as well or something like that, maybe we can afford to fly jets around the world and still travel the world.
There you go.
Because we get new technology. We make cleaner jets. I'm sure, let's say aviation must be a small snippet of global pollution.
It could be high.
There's a lot of planes in the air, but I mean, in terms of the coal-fired fire plant, that's the thousands of them that are burning in China or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, airplane.
Maybe we can find with technological advance, and like a shift away. Maybe we can find a way forward where we're not emitting as much carbon, and we can slowly taper over the years.
Yep.
I mean, we haven't seen this climate emergency yet, really. Like, I keep getting told every year, this year's going to be the worst year. We're going to have more storms, more bushfires. It doesn't really seem to be eventuating.
Seems a cyclic thing.
Mate, I actually reckon that a lot of the feeling is going around the world. There's a consensus now that what we're doing isn't really working. Like all this alternative renewable energy, the cost is outweighing the benefits, and
Yeah,
I think
and
that's slowly being realised.
Yeah.
By the time it's going to be cost sort of effective,
Prohibitive.
we're going to
yeah.
run out of the bloody materials to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got no lithium left.
Yeah.
Dang. All right.
Yeah.
What are we going to do? Let's dig up another mountain range.
Well, and lithium's really hard to recycle. So once
Yeah.
it's done, and I'm sure there are people coming up with solutions, and people that are very smart people.
Of course.
But recyclability of copper, you can only about 30% is recoverable from these things. So
Right. Yeah.
Unfortunately, with lithium batteries and all that, they'll end up like most of our other electronic devices. Like, you see these big plasma TV screens, there's piles of them dumped in certain African countries.
cheaper to get a new one.
They just
Yeah.
dumped. All our electrical appliances are dumped, and that's what happen that's what will happen with lithium batteries. I would expect. Like, what else do you do with them?
They're
then
in the
you've
ground.
got then. Unfortunately, poorer countries will then go to those things and like take them apart for their parts and components and certain minerals in there
down.
that they can reuse, which then exposes them to hazardous contamination by doing that. And then you've got environmental degradation as well by just storing that shit, which is loaded full of all these processed mined minerals.
Man, have you seen those images of like the poor African women on those cobalt mines
Mate,
carrying a little 1-year-old baby on their back?
Have you seen the little 7-year-olds with a bag of cobalt or whatever they're mining there on his shoulders, getting pushed around by like adults?
And we're all fucking high-fiving ourselves because we're driving an electric car. And,
Man.
hey, man, I'm saving the planet.
Mate,
And there's thousands of people in
It's
them.
like, yeah,
Thousands.
maybe you are emitting less carbon.
Mate, I had a good look at EVs.
So did I. Me and the missus
Yeah.
were quite keen on buying one. I've just lost my appetite for it now because
Oh, mate, I didn't look into it as to buy one. I refuse, and I just I sort of look down upon people that have bought one because I just think it's virtue signaling, mate. I think if that person really considered where that vehicle come from and the battery that they're charging every night in their driveway it come from and the human misery that come from that, I wouldn't buy one.
I mean, mate, we're all guilty because we're all new with mobile phones.
Yeah,
It's the
exactly
same thing
right.
on a smaller scale.
Smaller scale.
Lithium's different to the cobalt.
Oh, lithium's different. I mean, we mine a lot of lithium in Western Australia, and I wouldn't say that the guys in WA are doing it too hard.
40% of all the lithium in the world comes from green bushes in WA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I don't think all
so
of the stuff
we're better.
involved in it
We're
is-
better than people that are driving EVs.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, and Joe Rogan interviews a guy who infiltrated one of these mines in the Congo, a lithium or cobalt mine, and he actually risked his life to do so because these are heavily guarded by, they're run by Chinese-owned industry, and they're heavily guarded so that no one gets in there. But he did get in, and he got footage. And during that interview with Rogan, he's actually nearly brought to tears, and he's written a book about it. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But find that podcast on Rogan, and it's quite a moving discussion that he has. And
Do you remember his name?
I can't, mate. It's an Indian name. I think he's an Indian name, but he doesn't speak Indian. He's American. But he got footage of, and he explains how 9-year-old boys will go down to the very lowest tunnels to mine this shit. There's no breathing apparatus. There's no breathing protection. They're inhaling all this dust. And then often those mines will just collapse. So these kids suffer or suffocate underground, never to return. All that individual harm done during that mining process is then compounded to the landscape. They reckon that the villages nearby those mines are then destitute. Their land has been so raped and pillaged, there's nothing there for them to live a sustainable life from. So they have to migrate out of those areas to different areas. It is an absolute travesty about lithium mining and what goes into these batteries.
This goes back to my point about, like, do they not want us to have cheap, relatively clean energy in the form of nuclear? They can charge a fortune for these electric cars and batteries, and they've got a very finite life. A battery lasts, maybe 7 or 10 years now.
Then what do you do with it?
Then it's thrown away. Maybe they try and recycle some of it, whatever. But, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Siddharth Kara was his name.
Yeah.
I'm going to listen to that.
SIDDH.
Did you find that?
ARTH.
Did you find the date? Sorry, mate.
Yep. Yep.
Or
Sorry.
what episode it was?
Episode number. I can find that for you.
Okay. But
like, is it just
thanks,
big?
Jamie.
Is it just? Is it just big industry driving all of this to make money?
It is, mate.
Is it at the crux of all of this, destroying the planet, all the stuff we're doing? Is it just the financial system and the big fat cats trying to make money?
I reckon, mate.
Because
They don't
every
give a
single
fuck
person,
about the
I'm a
environment.
very average man. I'm not rich. I'm not poor. I'm rich in the terms of the global scale. We all are. But every single person I meet, no one wants to see the planet get destroyed. Everyone at heart is some sort of environmentalist, or at least likes to see. Everyone appreciates a pristine forest, a pristine beach, and we don't really see, obviously, the cataclysmic things that happen over in Africa and Asia and that sort of thing. But like, is it just big financial institutions and big fat cats driving this lust for profit?
That's what
the expense of the
differentiates
earth?
you, Smithy, and us from other human beings that are driven by money and power. We aren't. We're a different human being, mate. I believe that these people who are your oligarchs, your billionaires, all they give a fuck about is making more money and having more power. They don't give a fuck about the environment. You saw it during the whole vaccine thing. The money they made off that, and there was definitely confirmed reports of people dying or being injured. They didn't give a fuck about that.
Yeah.
And that's the type of human that they are.
What did they say over the last 2 years? So obviously the pandemic period, more billionaires made than in the history of man, or something like
It was
that.
the biggest transfer of wealth in human history.
300,000 new Western families thrust into poverty. So
Yeah.
we're seeing that divide.
Yeah. But going back onto the electric vehicles, like those people that are driving around their Teslas, you're not emitting emissions, which makes you feel great. You know, there's no emissions coming out of the back of your car.
Yeah.
But the emissions are happening in another part of that vehicle's life, and that is the maintenance, the mining of those minerals. So you have to mine 500,000 pounds of materials to make a single 1,000 pound battery. It takes 100 to 300 barrels of oil to make a battery that can hold 1 barrel of oil's equivalent energy.
So just going back to what you're saying with did you say 500,000 pounds to make a 1,000? Does a car have like a 1,000 pound battery? Is that the equivalent of one car, or because what's 1,000 pounds, like 400 kilos or something, or is that just a?
That's just a.
Okay, yeah, that's
just
right.
a. Yeah.
I'm just trying to get my head around that.
I don't think a car would
because
have
they're quite heavy, aren't they?
battery.
The batteries are quite heavy. I think is that right?
And
they
they're
weigh
very,
several hundred kilos. I would think so, maybe close.
I'm not sure, mate, but they're very what's the word when something's not stable?
Unstable.
They are very unstable in the way that they can explode.
Oh yeah.
Have you seen that?
Man.
And I've just done a course on some fire safety on the dangers of these things going off, and you can't put them out. Basically, what they've tried to do. So if these batteries are pierced by some
A crash, impact,
whatever, that will initiate an unsettling of whatever all the minerals inside. It will slowly emit a black and white gas. That's all. That's not a smoke. That's all the pollutants of the minerals slowly seeping out in a gaseous form. Then that will combust. And then when that combusts, that whole battery, because it comes in cells, so say there's like 5 cells all lined up in a row. So say one cell is punctured and that emits, goes on fire, that will then heat up the other ones to the point that they will charge. And you can't put them out. So basically you have to try to get water into that whole battery capsule and to envelop every battery in itself and drown it out basically. And even still, that's not.
Or let it burn out.
It's very hard to do, isn't it?
That's what they reckon you got to do. Just let the fucker burn.
Because they're using 100,000 litres of water to put out cars.
Yeah.
So in Europe, they've got, it's essentially a garbage truck with a crane on it. Have you seen these things?
Yeah.
And they pick the car that's up on fire and it's like a pool of water. A bit like the Simpsons when they used to drive around that. Do you remember that in the summer?
Simpsons, man.
I know. Anyway,
They got it all covered.
So yeah, they pick the crane up, the car's on fire, and they drop it in this big garbage truck of water and just submerge it.
Yeah.
And then even then, after that, they take them out, they catch fire in wherever they're storing them. So it could be a month later. This chemical process that's going on that's caused the initial fire slowly over a month, and they can catch fire in a month's time.
But how would you be if you invested in this business thinking, hey, this is a fucking great business, I'll invest all my superannuation into this? You can't actually get rid of the water because the water now is so heavily toxic that no one will take it from you because they don't know how to get rid of it.
Nobody knows what to do with it.
Yeah, so this guy with a sea container full of toxic water doesn't know what to do with it.
Is that what happens?
Yeah.
They can't get rid of the water.
They can't get rid of the water.
Because I know that because these EV vehicles, when they catch on fire, they don't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
So imagine
So they're coming up with these different solutions, and one of them was this dump truck. I didn't realize that you couldn't get rid of the water.
No, you can't get rid of the water. And there is one vehicle company now, I'm not quite sure who it is, that will actually, if the battery compartment is compromised, it will just actually drop of the bottom of the car.
Teslas are doing that.
Are they?
Yeah.
So then firefighters can...
so the battery will jettison in a crash.
And it's happened...
Sort of.
There's another...
Like disconnect the car kind of
Yes.
thing.
If it's on fire.
It's a bit like a... airbag. When the airbag hits, boom, it goes off. So I don't know if you've seen the video of it. The car hits something and is elevated, and when it's elevated, it jettisons the batteries out, and the batteries go flying, and this car's in the air, lands.
Some poor bugger's walking his dog down on the footpath,
getting whacked by
flying several 100 kilo battery,
which have been impacted, and they could catch fire. Man. So the solutions, the problem is creating. Well, the solution to the problem is creating more problems.
Yeah. And let's not talk about the pollution of those batteries once they're dead. Once they even run out of their lifespan. What do we do with them all?
Well, we can't recycle them. Yeah.
I saw somewhere that plans to manufacture enough batteries for electric vehicles will increase mining demand, and I think you might have touched on this earlier, Jonesy, of cobalt, zinc, lithium, cadmium by 400 to 4,000%. And there does not exist that amount of minerals or mining capacity to make that many batteries. So, and I was listening to Del Bigtree and the Jackson Report. They've got some. They were discussing that Joe Biden, his government, have just announced that by 2032, 67% of all vehicles on American roads will be electric. And
67%.
67%.
Oh, 67%
will be. So that's 2032. So that's 10 years.
10 years.
In 10 years. So do you think in 10 years' time, your average Joe Blow, working class citizen like us, is going to have the money to invest in, unless they bring the cost down dramatically in 10 years?
But how are they going to do that with all that comes from the
and
mining? I talked about that giant piece of copper in the 1800s, maybe with that. But now we're mining small deposits. And what is 550 tons, so something to get 100 tons of
500,000 pounds of materials
to
make a single 1,000 pound battery.
There you go.
Well, plus, are we going to have really green energy that powers these cars?
Exactly
right. You get home and you plug your car into your mains outlet to charge
Where's electricity coming from?
Is that going to be pure green energy that doesn't create CO2, or is this going to rob and Peter to pay Paul?
It's like that great photo I saw of the electric bus in, I can't remember the city, and it had its electric charger plugged into a diesel generator. But this is the concept that we're talking about.
Saving the planet, boys. Yeah. Yep. Guess her up.
This is the concept we're talking about. So people with their EVs are happy when they drive home and they plug their thing into their electric power. And obviously they're using some of their solar panels that have... But I don't know where they're storing their power from, because if they come home at night and they're plugging their car into their power, they're not using their solar unless they've got a battery or a inverter or a...
Well, the battery storage in houses is another issue, isn't it? Because people back into them when they're in their garage and they catch fire because they're the same thing.
Yeah.
So now I think by law you have to have bollards around them.
You do.
People, the tow ball from your car pierces these things when you back in. You're
and that's where most are located in
the car.
Garage.
In the garage. Yeah. That's another crazy. Okay, all of these flow-on effects of these things we don't really think about or talk about, or
just narrow-minded, aren't we?
No, that's why
so narrow-minded.
Nobody really knows, do they?
Almost arrogant.
It hasn't been carefully
I can
thought
solve
out.
this. It's like, no, you can't.
Yeah,
you'll make a lot of money out of it.
So to power my
developing
electric car,
technology and developing a finite resource. Finite resource is like the key to making a lot of money.
Yeah,
There's not much of this. You better get in now.
Yeah.
Oh shit. Okay.
Well, we talk about renewables, but the solar and wind is renewable.
Well, how do you renew
lithium,
cobalt?
How do
you renew that?
Copper. You can't. That's a finite resource.
We're going to find another planet. We're going to start mining meteors. Do they have?
But I think I talk about this with my wife, and I'm I get a bit down, and I'm like, well, what's the solution?
Well, I think the solution is to really make great technology with. Like, I haven't looked into what you're saying about fossil fuels sort of renewing as fast as using them or whatever, like being less of a finite resource than we think of. But if that is the case, I'm sure we can really clean up emissions.
What can I do though as
From
an
a fossil
individual?
fuel.
You don't want to be all doom and gloom and just throw
No.
your hands up and go, well, there's nothing we can do about it. And what can I do as a human being individually when you talk about the commercial and residential emissions are low. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like in the
So-
global scale.
So if the push is to get electric vehicles and all our transport is electric, right? I even heard some strange concept that there's going to be an electric
Aircraft.
powered aircraft. Fuck if
Yeah.
I'm getting on that.
Mate,
So-
imagine one of those bad boys catching on fire.
Mate,
They're already there, aren't they?
Yeah,
They
there
have
are
them
some
in the US?
yeah.
Yeah,
And
there are some light aircraft that are electric. Little.
if they want us to have
small
electric
ones.
vehicles, I'm all cool with that. But like you just said, Smitty, where are we charging it from? And I think the answer to that is if we need electricity to charge these things, it's just got to be nuclear generated electricity.
Mm.
It's power 24/7. As I said before, it produces like twice as much electricity for less dollars. So our energy costs are going to come down.
I think the lifespan of them is quite long too, isn't it?
Of
Like once you've got that nuclear fuel in place, I think it works for quite a long time.
yeah.
It's not like a coal plant. You're continuously pouring coal into it. Like you've sort of got your nuclear fuel rods. And I think
Yes.
they've got quite a long
Yep.
lifespan.
Inanimate carbon rod.
So
In
you're
rugby
right there,
trust.
Smitty. So what you're saying there, mate, and I read somewhere, materials to manufacture solar panels require 17 times more materials than a nuclear plant.
Yeah.
So we're looking at stuff like concrete, steel, glass, that sort of thing. You've got an increase in mining of the land to get all the materials for your solar panels and for your wind farms. The safety, there was a Lancet study in 2007 called the Electricity Generation and Health, and they showed that nuclear had the least deaths from air pollution or accidents during production compared to coal, petroleum or natural gas.
Yep.
So it's obviously safe to work with. And I guess it's just the environmental impacts. Uranium fuel, as you mentioned before, Smitty, is dense. They reckon a Rubik's Cube size uranium fuel can supply as much energy as you need for your lifetime. A Rubik's Cube size. Huh? That is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So consider the less land footprint or the mining footprint that you're leaving for that. That Ivanpah solar farm, that solar panel farm that I mentioned earlier in the US, it's in California, I think, that uses 450 times more land than a nuclear plant. And you would need 17 times more Ivanpah solar farms to yield the same amount of power as a nuclear facility.
And they also don't work when it's cloudy or it's nighttime.
Exactly, and they are less reliable.
Yeah.
Nuclear is the answer, man.
How do you get people to come around to that? They're obviously scared of your Fukushima, your Chernobyl,
Yeah,
3 Mile Island.
definitely, mate. Yeah.
So, yeah, and
It's just
but maybe-
education,
yeah,
isn't it, mate?
maybe times have changed. Technology is better. We are 30 years. When was Chernobyl? 90.
Oh, in the 80s, I think.
80s, was it?
Yeah.
Well, I think France are the leaders, mate. France produce 2 times more electricity from clean energy sources than Germany, right? So Germany have gone full into renewables. Clean. So France, 91% of their electricity from clean sources. Germany, 46%.
Because I think France have something like 75% nuclear. Is that right?
France pays less than 2 times the cost for energy than Germany. So France pays 16 cents per kilowatt versus Germany paying 30 cents per kilowatt.
What do we pay over here? Do you guys know?
I'm not sure. But the answer to that
11?
is spot on, Smitty.
No,
France
okay,
receives 75% of its electricity from nuclear power.
Don't hear of a lot of nuclear explosions over in France, do you?
No.
And I guess their facilities are probably more modern, more well
Of
tamed.
course.
There must be really strict regulations on them.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
Lenny and Carla supervisors.
Home
But to
upset,
me-
eating donuts.
He got sacked.
yeah. And I mean the frogs.
There's a pecking birds clicking on the one of those water drinking birds.
But maybe the solution is then someone's got to be an innovator, and maybe that's France. And we look at France
Yeah.
in 5 years and go, wow, look what they're doing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just so
we
hard to
need
take
to
the
get on
French
board.
seriously.
Yeah,
Well, I think
we.
maybe countries like the US need to be the leaders in
Well,
this. You know,
yeah.
I mean, the
people
US
look
do
to
have
the-
some nuclear power.
They
don't
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got one,
Remember
right?
everything.
In Sydney?
I don't think it generates power. I think it's for like medical irradiation and testing and stuff like that.
Right.
I don't think it's
it-
power.
Yeah. Is it CSIRO one?
Maybe, yeah.
I have heard,
Or is it army or government or something?
I have
Anyway.
heard whispers somewhere that the Australian government is looking at nuclear energy.
Yeah.
I
I
think
know.
we're a long
I
way
think
off.
Malcolm Roberts is a big proponent of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems to be
Others.
those senators that whether you look at them as conspiracy theorists or not,
Alternative
Alton,
thinkers.
Rennick,
Yeah.
Pauline Hanson.
Yeah.
And then once again, the other politicians just say, "Oh, look at these crazy idiots! Oh, they're talking about nuclear. Look at these idiots."
Yeah.
And you go, "Well, have you looked into? Have you done?"
Yeah.
And maybe they have, like Smithy was talking about. Maybe they've looked at it and go, "Well, this is the way to control the population,
And
keep
I s-
power."
I suppose we're not at that desperate state yet. I mean, our energy costs haven't gone through the roof
Yeah.
like the US and like Europe.
Well, because we're a rich nation of resources, aren't we?
Yeah.
You know, we've got that natural gas. We've got
Yeah.
But if you
Uranium.
believe the Greta Thunbergs of the world and everything, we are at that stage. If you look at it
how dare you?
if you look at it from a clean point of view, and carbon is going to be the death of us all, and we're going to have this catastrophic tipping point we get to, and the whole world's just going to catch on fire, and we're going to be, boiling hot all the time, and the seas are going to rise. Well, then there's your argument again for nuclear, because it's not going to generate any CO2.
Yeah.
It generates water vapor,
Yeah.
which, by the way, is a CO2 gas, greenhouse gas.
Yeah.
Water vapor.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. But I mean, maybe oil companies, they've invested largely in renewables like wind and solar, so maybe they're the roadblock at the moment.
Because it's finite, isn't it? They want another finite thing that they can,
Mm.
like we've been running out of oil. I remember as a kid in the 90s, man, we're running out of oil. The world's going to run out of oil soon. Do you remember that? When you were a
remember
kid in the 90s?
12, 13 years ago, there was an oil crisis. We were done.
Crisis,
there
we're
was
done
no
with oil. And they're
And
like, we got more fucking oil than ever, baby. Let's all enjoy some oil.
rabbit
And it's
out of
like,
a hat, we got more oil. Where'd that come
Hey.
from? Hey.
Oh, yeah, we drilled it.
Yeah, hey, we found it. It's there. It's the
Big surprise.
second biggest liquid in the world.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we're not gonna. There's not gonna be those things, though, is there? There's not gonna be a rabbit out of the hat, more oil. Just shit, we found enough copper. Let's build all these
Yeah.
solar
So
panels.
circling right back, what do we do?
Yeah. Well, as an individual, I'd
Us
like to
three,
know.
what do we do to save the world,
Yeah.
environmentally speaking?
Yeah, I'm pretty big on it. Like
I'm huge on it.
I was separating the recycles and
Yep.
plastics and, collecting the cans and all that kind of stuff. And does that make an impact? I don't know. I'm going to keep doing it.
I don't know.
I don't know. I think
I'm a huge fan of the whole think global, act local, but
Yeah.
sometimes you feel like you're banging your head against a wall.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what you think about. Well, if we're not going to look at these things, throw your hands in the air and go, what's the point? Or
Yeah.
do you just, you barrel on, you do what you keep doing,
Yeah.
I feel good about having solar on the roof. Maybe that's a bit of virtue signaling, isn't it? Like what we're talking about, but
Like I feel like maybe your political choices are the biggest way you can impact
yeah,
global
yeah.
situation.
Or getting the word out and doing the research.
Let your politicians know
Yeah.
that you would be in favour of investigating some alternatives like nuclear or,
Yeah.
I mean, hydrogen was the other one that was supposedly pretty good. I don't know if you guys, we had those hydrogen-powered buses in Perth
Yeah.
a while back.
There's 6 hydrogen-powered cars around the country.
Hydrogen-
from Toyota, I think, got them out
hydrogen-
there on an experiment.
Fuel cell, I mean, the only byproduct of running a hydrogen cell is water.
Water, yeah.
Yeah,
Water-
wasn't
water-
Twiggy
water comes
Forrester
out of the
a big?
tailpipe.
Wasn't he investing massively in those big hydrogens,
I
like
hope so, mate.
batteries?
I hope so. And I mean, the best thing about hydrogen is it's the most common element in the universe.
Yeah.
It's like number 1 on the periodic table.
Well, there's,
so
it's
you're
fairly
not,
big.
you're not going to run out of hydrogen.
It's fairly big in the US, right?
I don't know, mate. Yeah,
Because
I'm not
they've
too
got
sure.
hydrogen fuel farms, and you can fill your car up.
Is it volatile? That's the word I was looking for.
It's extreme.
Oh,
volatile.
yeah,
it's
it's-
extremely.
it's-
The Hindenburg.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it is.
Hindenburg ruined it for us. Those
Yeah.
fuckers.
Well, there again, there's the old nuclear scare tactic.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Past history.
Petrol's pretty fucking volatile.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
A gas tank full of petrol in your car.
yeah.
Yeah.
You don't think about that, do you?
No, you don't.
No.
You know, that stuff burns.
Yeah.
Sure
I
does.
don't know.
It does.
Natural gas.
Yeah.
burns, you know.
I think it's
Yeah.
a good point,
Thanks
Jonesy.
for clarifying.
Yeah. It burns, baby.
As an individual, I'm not concerned about CO2 emissions as such. I'm concerned about water pollution, air pollution.
Like, I'll go to the beach and I'll pick up
Yeah,
ocean plastic.
yeah,
And maybe that is me feeling good about myself.
Yep.
Or maybe it's maybe it's not a turtle ending up with rope around its neck. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
I think as humans, we have a duty to try to live more harmoniously with the world and be
Definitely, mate.
less mechanized and be more natural. And that's my personal goal, to live more harmoniously with my planet.
Yeah.
But there are modern conveniences that I will also indulge in that I will try to limit or reduce it. I just think though, I don't want to end this as a negative thing, and it shouldn't be negative because there are many smart people out there doing a lot of good work to harmonise humans with our planet. And I think that's the secret. It's not all about making money and bringing in all these policies and cars and electric vehicles, whatever. It's just about making humans more aware of the harmonisation with the planet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And having, we talked about it right at the start of not being focused on emissions and carbon, but focusing on the plethora of different issues that there is, wetland degradation, plastics in the ocean, pollution, toxins, glyphosate, all those kind of things. And, I mean, I haven't used, and I have in the past, you do what you do until you know better, right? So, I'm spraying glyphosate all over my weeds. I haven't done that for 10 years probably.
Yeah.
I handpick the clover out of my lawn.
Yep.
And, I mean, is one man doing that enough? I don't know. But, I feel better about knowing what I know and not, like you say, living more harmoniously and doing something.
Doing
a little bit. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I reckon we've got to reconnect a little bit more with nature, and we've almost got to make these changes out of a love and a connection with nature rather than fear of carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
Don't be fucking scared of this gas that you can't see, you can't smell, you can't taste. Very hard to quantify unless you've got scientific equipment.
Heavier than you.
Just there you go. Let's just reconnect with nature, have a love of nature, and make our change out of that rather than out of fear.
Yeah.
We're very fearful at the moment.
Yeah. And to the young people, if my kids ever listen to this, which they probably won't, but don't be scared of your future, of the Earth's future. The Earth is going to be around a long, long time. And I think as humans, we underestimate the power of nature, and we overestimate our power and influence. And I think we always try to influence things and control things. We try to control viruses and bacteria. We try to control weather. We try to control all these things that don't need to be controlled. Yeah. But to younger generations, don't panic. Don't think the world's going to end, because this is just the
world won't end.
The world won't end. But even humans are humans are very, very adaptable creatures. And
they're cockroaches.
We have seen, some of us are. We have survived as a species many, many environmental impacts, and we will keep on surviving them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel that about the planet. The planet will go on. Forever. Yeah. It'll go on longer than we're alive, and there may be there may be an extinction. There may be whatever killed the dinosaurs. That might happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. But sometimes I feel like if we keep going how we're going,
we have to make some changes.
Yeah.
As a society. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we are incredibly resilient. Like we've got people living in every part of the world, from the Sahara Desert right up to the Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
We've got people living there. Clearly it can be done.
Yeah.
There are challenges, but we can overcome many challenges. Yeah, we've just got to get away from this greedy, sort of egotistical desire to just control nature and destroy everything. We've got to just live a bit more with nature.
Yeah.
Maybe grow a bit of food yourself rather than getting it shipped in from Woolies who buy it from the United States or
exactly.
Every time you go and buy lemons from the supermarket, it's usually like product of USA. Yeah. Oh, fuck! Surely we can grow lemons in Australia.
I could walk down my street, up and down my street, and find 10 houses with lemons. I don't know how you.
Yeah,
and if they're not there, you don't have them.
And maybe support some local companies.
Yeah,
where the supply chain isn't coming from halfway across the world.
Exactly.
Maybe support your local guy. Pay him $10 extra for a product.
Consider, Smithy, those lemons from the USA. And we looked at transport as the number one contributor to greenhouse emissions.
Yep.
Think of all the transport that's gone into that one lemon coming to your store.
Yep.
Yeah.
Whereas if we bought it locally or got it from your neighbour's
tree. Pinched it from your neighbour's tree.
That's what I do.
I do, yeah.
So if you've got the financial means, maybe pay a bit extra for WA beef, for local produce, grow some of your own stuff.
And there are people doing regenerative ag in WA.
Got to support that.
It's getting bigger.
Yeah.
It's and we talk about voting with your feet, but spending your money where, and the reason why it is getting better is because people are going, okay, this is the way to go. This is the solution.
There's an awakening, I reckon.
Yeah,
there's an
There's a
awakening.
massive awakening.
Yeah, particularly with our consumables.
Yep.
What we eat.
This social media we spoke about in the last episode, while being terrible, also does band together some amazing groups of people to share ideas
Definitely.
and to share know-how and to, get these grassroots ideas off the ground.
Yeah,
and maybe that is part of the solution. That collective of people. Yeah, okay, we're gonna go to a co-op. We're gonna source out local farmers, and maybe that's part of the regeneration and moving forward and the solution.
I think you're right, mate. I think the biggest thing you can do is actually vote with your dollar.
Yeah,
because that's what our society values.
Yep.
If politicians and big business start seeing people vote with their dollar,
Yep.
that's the only thing that will get their attention.
Yeah.
They don't care if you're outraged. They don't care if you're scared.
Yeah.
They don't care if you're angry. But they do care if you start spending in other areas and they go, oh, hang on a sec.
And
Lots
so
of people
do,
flocking to this.
and so do farmers and consume. They got to make a buck.
Yep.
So I look at my local farmers market that we've been going to probably for 5 or so years.
Mm.
Initially, not so busy, but now it's packed. Like it's flat out.
good. That's great.
Yeah.
great, yeah.
So people are going there because they're realizing, this is the way to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm.
Good stuff.
Beat the corporates.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's a fairly lengthy discussion, boys.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah.
Yep.
I felt it was good, empowered.
It doesn't have to be a negative topic.
No.
It's not. It's just
No.
controversial, but it's not negative.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
you need to just have a bit more clarity around it about
Yeah.
what really, really it is about.
It's a very nuanced, very complicated topic.
Yeah.
You can't just dull it down to one thing.
Yeah.
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 One. Yeah. Emissions
Carbon.
based. It's just
Carbon.
carbon, mate.
It's not carbon.
No.
No.
Might be a little bit carbon. There's a lot of other things though.
Is there
a lot.
carbon in? Is there carbon in beer? There is, isn't there? Like the bubbles?
Carbonated.
It's carbonated.
Maybe we should go and have one.
I feel like we should.
I think.
I could use a beer after
Yeah.
that.
I
Wet the
think
whistle.
so.
We've been talking for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I guess we've probably done it.
as long as
death,
it's a
but
craft brewery that's locally brewed.
yeah.
Of course.
There you go. We'll source out a co-op of beer makers
yeah.
and go and have one.
Right on.
Yeah.
Good to you boys. Good
Good
chat.
on you, fellas. Yeah. Until next time.
All right.
Do it.
Get your air guitars ready.
See you, boys.